Blur, 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 Blur. Okay, that's enough. I wanted to talk about one of my favorite albums of all time, or at least pretty high up there, which is the album Think Tank by a band called Blur. So if you know the band Gorillaz, my favorite band of all time, I'm sure you know the story by now. It's obviously the guy behind it, Damon Albarn. This is his original band. I wanted to just kind of explain why it's one of my favorite albums. I'll try to pepper in like a little bit of the history, the story, or whatever behind it, but I'm probably going to get things wrong. I'm not as familiar with it. I'm just here to try to convince you to listen to it. It's funny, the first Blur album I listened to was their self-titled, mostly because I really liked song 2, and that was like in a FIFA game that my friend had growing up. So when I found out it was the guy from Gorillaz, he was even more like, whoa, okay, cool. Let me see what else they have. And of course, the first one I went to was the one with the Banksy, like graffiti stenciling on the front of it. Fun fact, that actually sold later on, I think, at an auction for like 75,000 quid. Whatever that is in dollars, I don't know. But this album is pretty special because a lot of people call it the hidden Gorillaz album in a sense. And that's because by this point, this is like in 2003. So Gorillaz self-titled was in 2001. So, the guy Damon, he already had a little bit of like I have this other project, that I'm able to experiment more with. And so he was kind of bringing a little bit of those flavors. Whereas like with this band, obviously it's more of a collaborative thing. And they kind of try to stick to like a certain sound. Even though their last album was pretty experimental, this one was kind of like, okay, like this is the band record, But of course, wouldn't you know it, drama involved. So, he's not as enthusiastic like with making music with the band Blur. Not that he hates it, but, he's got this passion project on the side that's doing really well commercially. And not to mention the guitarist from the band Blur was having a wee bit of alcoholism problems. So obviously the girlies fight. It becomes this whole big deal that I think he shows up on maybe one track, but otherwise he storms off and he leaves the band, the bassist, the drummer, and then Damon himself to just figure it out. You guys are on your own. You have Damon now. He has to kind of take charge in a bit. And you have the drummer. I think it's Alex. I have to look this up. Hold on. Alex and Dave. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to remember. But they get to feature a little bit more because without the guitarist, the bass and the drums are just a little bit more pronounced on this album compared to the other ones. And because of the Gorillaz taste, influence and stuff going on here, a lot of the production, there's a lot of synthesizers, there's even a melodic on one of the tracks. So it has like this vibe of like, it's borderline like a Gorillaz album, but it's just differentiated just enough to become like, it's still part of the band's catalog. The opening track to this, I think for me, my favorite albums I've noticed, you will tend to have an opener track that really leaves a lasting impression on me. So, first ones, easy ones that come to mind from that era too. There's Turn on the Bright Lights by Interpol. You have that song Untitled, which is like, oh my God, damn, they really believe it. They don't believe in the song, or they do really believe in the song that they didn't even give it a title. But it opens up and it's just slow build up and it blows my mind. Another good one would be Deer Hunter's Microcastle, which is blares right in your face with like these like really sad sounding like waves of guitar chords and reverb, and it's real good psychedelic stuff. So same with Think Tank. The first track on this album is called Ambulance, and David Albarn's real funny because like it's got this like drum machine type of beat. I don't know if it's a real drum or if it's a drum machine, but it sounds like one. And he has a way of making like just really robotic sounding electronic beats sound real cool. I don't get it. When I try to do it as a musician, it's like Baby's first recording studio, but when for some reason this guy does it, he just makes it work wonderfully. So it starts off with this just like that, and it's like, okay, this is a little bit almost like amateur hour in a sense, until, funnily enough, you start like this slow buildup of like, okay, now you have the bass coming in, which really sells it, where it's just kind of brooding in the background. And you have like these little like ambient synthesizers and noises and a guitar, I think, even in the background, just slowly building it up. And it just starts to like just ramp up. And the actual drum machine part, it almost becomes like hypnotic. Like you have all these like influences around it, like building around the drum machine. And it just starts building and building and building. I think I remember Damon wrote this song about like, if I remember right, just like his daughter being born and loving her forever. And like even like the first line, like I ain't got nothing to be afraid of. Like it's just like I really like when people use like common phrases, I guess, in a sense that you'd see in real life, but it becomes like this real strong melody that just catches in your head. It's just beautiful. And it builds up and it builds up until it finally just has like just crashing guitars like jamming away for a little bit. It kind of busts a little bit into like this like African type of rhythm in the middle of it. The drums again start coming in and it just like becomes like this chaotic mess of a track. And then it finally ends and you're like, damn, okay, I guess we're in for something different on this Blur album. But at the same time, you're just left speechless, you know? And there's a lot of like also more traditional, like, oh, this is the ballad track that are amazing too. There's Out of Time on this album, which is like very, kind of like, I like this, for lack of a better term, I might butcher it, but just like this Middle Eastern influence, this instrument in the background that's really pretty and adds like this ambience to the track. And then you have just like Damon's vocals, along with the drum and the bass. They're just kind of like, it's very gentle, but very like, it's just sad and somber sounding. We're watching the world spinning, gently out of time. Like that's the type of like vibe that the instruments themselves are even giving. And even some of the weirder tracks on those, there's a song called Crazy Beat, which it used to piss me off when I listened to it as a teenager. And then I got really into it later on when after I've heard it a few times and I grew to appreciate it. It almost sounds like this chaotic, like just punk. It's like this almost like Sega Dreamcast punk type of like just fun, and the actual lyrics and stuff get stuck in your head. I grew to appreciate the freaking Crazy Frog vocals they have on like the Crazy Beat. And there's even just a lot of like simple, more straightforward, again, it's like more Blur stuff. Like there's the songs like Sweet Song, Good Song, which, fun fact, Damon picked that up because in Africa they tend to name things very simplistic in that way, where it's just like this song is about the tree, and then this song is about like the moon. It's like moon song, tree song. And so, you know, God bless when British white men go to Africa for a spiritual awakening. Seems to have happened quite a few times with great results. But those songs, Good Song, for example, is just very, yes, it's simplistic and it's got like a nice little acoustic guitar, but it's just so chill. And the production on it just makes it just bounce and really come to life in a great way. In fact, the lyrics are very like, almost like anti-war, I think, in a sense, which is what a lot of this album gets into. It's just a lot of like, you hear subtle talks about war, subtle talks about love. Maybe the love one is not as subtle, along with the not so subtle references to a lot of drugs, and even just straight up like just fun songs, you know. There's a song called On My Way to the Club. It's incredibly stuck in my head, and it's just that it's the exact same thing I would want playing if I'm just taking like a wee bit, like, you know how chavs, I've never been to British land, but I just imagine someone taking a wee bit of a stroll down to the club with just the confidence and the swagger that song has in itself. And you do hear a lot of like the same influences that are like on Gorillaz projects, where it's like willing to experiment with more electronic sounds, willing to experiment with just, again, like how I mentioned the Middle Eastern instrumentation on that track, Out of Time. You hear a lot of this like stuff in the background, willing to experiment with more worldly sounds, you know. There's a song called Moroccan's People Lounge. I feel like I have to look up where Morocco is so I don't talk out of my ass. Morocco in North Africa, just as I suspected. But you can feel it in the lyrics and like the melody of the vocals and stuff, that it has that influence from where it's being recorded. You know, you have these worldly influences on these tracks, something that you'd become really familiar with if you listen to Gorillaz albums. I mean, they'll have songs on their album Plastic Beach, for example, where you have just this clash on this one track I can think of right away called White Flag, where you have the Syrian orchestra handling one half of the song and then this electronic beat handling the other half of the song, and then the peanut butter and jelly halfway through. And if you really want to get full-blown Gorillaz, the song Jets, it's got this like, I don't know if it's like a ukulele or something, but it's just a really simple repeating riff where like just like these almost like electronic crunchy drums come in, the bass comes in super crunchy, and it's got this like hypnotic just repetition going on throughout it, where it's just like, jets are like common sense. What do these lyrics mean? I don't know, but I like it and it stays with me for the rest of my life. That's how my brain works. But listen to Jets and tell me that isn't like a B-side in a Gorillaz album. But I think overall, that's my thoughts on it, you know. This is one of the albums I for sure will listen to at least once or twice every year since I first heard it. I think I first got into it at a particular time in my life where I was very focused on like, I think just where can I listen to more music that borrows from other parts of the world, you know? So me being young Fletching in high school, I was like, kind of like my link, I guess, into thinking about like, oh yeah, they do make a different music in Morocco. They do make different music in Syria. Interesting. Okay, well, how do I start? Like, is there someone that kind of combines that kind of stuff? Yes, this album is from 2003, but it almost seemed to be like coinciding with the stuff I was listening to that was new in that time when I was in high school, the 2010s, where people were borrowing a lot from like different parts of the world, and it was like it was indie sleaze and cool to do so. And because obviously I was a huge Gorillaz fan, it was just really stuck with me to have this album that has a lot of that same thumbprint on it, I think. So since then, a lot of the members have stated that they don't really like this album. David himself has said there's a lot of bad songs on this, which is a shame for poor old Vic, because again, I would love to hear this live, but they've never really done it live. Hopefully I have this, I think I have this somewhere on vinyl. If I do, I'll try to splice in some quick footage right here. But in any case, I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope to talk more about my favorite albums. This one really stuck to me. I was thinking about it today, and hey, figured why not.